Hi everyone, welcome to Cooking with Chef Rich. Today we're going to be making a white chocolate mousse strawberry shortcake. Absolutely delicious and a great cake to look at. I mean, it's just really one of the nicer cakes you'll see. So let's jump right in. The first thing that we have to do is make a white chocolate ganache. The outside is going to have I'm calling it a white chocolate mousse, but technically it's not a mousse. Mousses have both whipped egg whites and whipped egg yolks, and this has neither. Technically, it's a white chocolate whipped cream, but we don't have to tell people that, so let's jump right in. Making ganache is very easy. It's just a mix of heavy cream, chocolate. Very often, we will put in either butter or corn syrup, but today, no corn syrup. It's just going to be the chocolate and butter. So I have over here heavy cream that's just right about to come up to a boil. You do want to watch heavy cream because it can boil over very easy, as you can see. I'll have all the ingredients listed down below in the description. I have some white chocolate and I have some butter. I put the butter and chocolate in, and now we're just going to keep stirring it until this dissolves, you'll have to stir it for a minute or two, that's all right. Once it all comes together and it's totally dissolved, we're going to put it in a container. We're going to let it cool for a good solid 45 minutes, and then we're going to put it in the refrigerator to cool. This has to be done 5 to 6 hours before you make the cake. It has to be totally chilled before we can make whipped cream out of it. So we do want to do this a little bit in advance. The first thing that we have to do for this is we have to make some simple syrup. The cake itself is actually a white chocolate cake, but it tends to be it's fine. It's not a problem. When you eat it, you will not notice that it's dry. Classical French pastry, very often you will take a cake that is known to be dry and you brush it with something called simple syrup. Simple syrup is just a mix of sugar and water, very, very easy. So over here I have 1 cup of water. I am using filtered water, just so you know. And I have 1 cup of sugar. I'm going to put this in, and we're going to bring this up to a simmer. And once it comes up to a simmer, it's done. But I do need that cool by the time I make the cake, so I do that first thing, so it just sits and gets cool. And I'll show you what it looks like when it is done. See you shortly. So our simple syrup came up to a boil. Literally, it just boiled for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. Make sure that all the sugars is dissolved. Next thing I'm going to add to this is 1 tablespoon. This is a strawberry extract. And it's important that you add it afterwards and not before. It has alcohol in it. And if you boil alcohol, the alcohol actually dissipates and is basically worthless. So I'm going to add just 1 tablespoon of strawberry extract. Gonna mix this in, and now I'm going to be using this later when we do our cake. So anyway, I'll see you shortly. And I'm also going to teach you some basic things about baking. The first thing that we need is softened butter. That's the first ingredient. And as you can see, my butter just came out of the refrigerator. It's hard like a rock. When I press on it, it doesn't move at all. We're going to put it in the microwave for just about 10 seconds. Let's talk about baking principles before we actually start baking. I haven't done any baking videos as of yet, so I do want to actually just go through some basic principles. Baking is a science, cooking is an art, meaning you can do whatever you want with food, and as long as somebody doesn't get sick, it's all good. With baking, there's actually a lot of scientific things that go on in baking. You're mixing flour, which generally has some type of gluten, eggs, which has albumin, which is a protein, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. And there's a lot of chemical reactions when you bake. If you don't follow a recipe exactly, very often your recipe won't work. Once you become more proficient, you can play with it a bit once you understand the principles of baking. But just to start changing ingredients, more often than not, it doesn't work. Next thing, when it says 1 cup, it should be a level cup, meaning you fill up your cup, take a knife or a spatula, and it should be perfectly level. When it talks about sifting, a lot of you may not have sifters. I don't have a sifter here, and that's fine. I'm just going to use a strainer to sift it. What sifting does is it gets out any lumps. Just by pushing down on it, it gets out all the lumps of the flour, and your flour's sifted. Most recipes will say whether it has to be sifted or not. A lot of recipes don't call for it. This one is using cake flour, and cake flour is very, very clumpy very often. If you look at it closely, you'll see a lot of balls. So if you don't sift it right, you will get clumps in it, and a clump of flour in your cake doesn't taste very good. So this was cake flour. And here I have some baking powder and some salt. And I'm also going to just run that through the sifter in case there's any clumps in that. And that's pretty good. While we were sifting our cake flour, our microwave went off. And it's probably still a little bit hard, I'm guessing. I'm just going to push on it. Yeah, still a little bit hard. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it over and do another 10 seconds. So this is ready. Over here I have 3 eggs. I have 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I have 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon of milk. When you measure a wet ingredient, you always measure it with the measuring cup on a table. You never hold it because very often when you hold it, it kind of goes to the one side or the other. So you always measure it while it's sitting on the table. We have 8 ounces of chocolate, which we're going to be melting in a minute, and we have sugar. Let's check our butter. And you'll notice that now it's nice and smushy. So now we have room temperature butter, just like that. The next thing we have to do is we have to melt our chocolate. I'm going to melt it in the microwave. I'm going to put it in for about 45 seconds. Our chocolate's just about ready, so we'll check our chocolate before we do anything. You'll notice that it's still not melted. It's still very solid. I'm going to just give it a mix. And it's very important to mix in between microwaving it because otherwise the chocolate will burn. I'm going to put it back in the microwave for probably another 45 seconds. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our butter, we're going to put it in a mixer, and we're going to cream our butter and our sugar together. By the way, if I didn't say this, all the ingredients will be listed down below. This is a flat paddle as opposed to either a dough hook or a whisk. I'm going to put this on. And we're going to cream our butter and sugar together. We're going to let this mix for probably a minute or so. So our microwave just went off. You can see that it's actually getting soft now. Still a little clumpy. I'm going to let this sit just for a few seconds and then stir it again. And I'm going to guess that the whole thing will be melted through and through, and that's perfect. So I'm going to put this back on. So this has been mixing for just about a minute and it's mixed through and through. I have 3 eggs. I'm going to add the eggs one at a time. If you add all 3 at a time, you're going to get clumps in there, and that's not what you want. I'm going to add an egg. I'm just going to mix it for about 20 seconds and then scrape it down. That's pretty good. We add our second egg. Actually didn't scrape it down. I should scrape it down real fast. We're going to put this on. And you just have to mix it until the egg is mixed through. The last time it wasn't sticking to the sides. This time it is. So you definitely have to do a pretty good scrape. That way you won't get any clumps in your cake. The scraping is real important when you're making a cheesecake. It has to be scraped really well. And our last egg. 20 seconds. Scrape it down. The next thing we're going to add is our vanilla. Mix it for just a few seconds. That's good. Then we're gonna go back to our chocolate, see how it's doing. You'll notice that as I mix it, it's totally melted. You should always melt chocolate, if you're doing it in a microwave, in 2 or 3 separate parts, mixing it up each time. So that's pretty good. Use our spatula to get all the chocolate off. And add it. And once you add this, you want to add it quickly because the cold eggs will make the chocolate get hard very, very quickly. I'm just going to scrape this down. Trying to hit the cameraman with my cake. Next thing we're going to do. So we have our flour, our baking powder, and our salt. Before I put this in here, I'm actually going to just mix it up. That way I know that the baking powder and salt get mixed in through the flour. And what we're going to do in 3 separate parts, we're going to add about 1/3 of this, approximately. They're not to be measured, but approximately 1/3. A bit more. Good. And we're going to add about 1/3 of our milk. You just have to mix it until it's mixed through. Scrape it down. A lot of scraping down in this. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add 1/3 of our flour, approximately. Once again, 1/3 of our milk. Always start your machine off slowly and then pick up speed. That's it. Literally just 5 to 10 seconds. Once it's mixed through, that's all you want. The rest of our milk. Scrape it down one last time. So the next thing that we have to do is line the bottom of our pan with parchment paper. I have a piece of parchment paper. A full sheet is twice this. I just cut it in half. What's the easiest way to line this with this? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some cooking spray and just blot it a little bit, just so when we put the parchment paper down, it doesn't move. Some people will say, well, you just trace it, which becomes a little bit of a pain in the neck. There is an easier way. We're going to fold our parchment paper in half this way. Then we're going to fold it again. So now the tip, or like the part that's not folded, is right in this corner. We're going to fold this up. We're going to fold this up. We're going to bring this over. We're going to measure it. The tip's going to go right in the middle. The to here is right about here. We're going to take a knife. It's not going to be absolutely perfect, but it'll be close enough. Take a sharp knife. We're going to unfold it. And that is how you line a pan with parchment. And we'll do the same thing with the other pan. So our mix is done. I basically just took it off the machine. Our pans have the parchment paper, they've been sprayed. This is something called an offset spatula as opposed to a straight spatula. So an offset spatula does help. And this is obviously a rubber spatula. Basically, I'm going to put half the mix in here. You don't have to measure how much is going in each, but try to eye it the best you can. You want to do about 50-50. Then we're going to take our offset spatula. Just keep going around and round. So it's relatively flat. Some cakes that are very, very airy, you kind of go like this and it helps set them. This is rather a thicker cake. The white chocolate has a lot to do with that. So banging on it doesn't do anything. So that's where the spatula comes in to try to get it pretty smooth. One more. That's fine. We're going to bang it just a little bit. All right. We're going to bake this at 350. I will let you know how long it was in for. So we're working on our white chocolate cake. So when you push on it, it's nice and firm, and it's pulling away from the sides. That's done. This one has probably another 3 to 5 minutes, I'm guessing. It's starting to pull away. I just want to get a little bit brown. So probably about another 3 minutes. I'll show you what it looks like. See you in a few minutes. So this white chocolate cake is also ready. You'll see it's nice and brown and also coming away from the sides. This was in the oven for right about 45 minutes. If they were equal, they probably would have been in for about 43 minutes. So just to give you an idea of how long they cook for, I'm going to let them cool. And once they're cool, I'll show you what to do next. So our white chocolate mousse strawberry shortcake is now cool and we're ready to work with it. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to just even this out. Try to hold your knife perfectly straight. If you have a Lazy Susan, it's a little bit easier. If you don't have a Lazy Susan, it's not that big of a deal. This the kids can snack on or whoever. It's a little bit messed up over here, but it's not a big deal. There's the same thing over here. You'll notice that I'm turning the cake. My knife is kind of staying right where it is. My knife really isn't moving, it's just going back and forth in a nice sawing motion, but the cake's going round and round. Clean off the table. This is a drop pan, meaning that you can open it up and the bottom drops out. What we're going to do is we're going to put this whole thing inside here. Good. Now, earlier we had made a simple syrup with some strawberry. As I'd said before, if you look at this, it's actually a very, very dry cake. And if you eat it just as is, which I already tried it, it is very, very dry. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the simple syrup and just blot the cake. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it nice and moist. And the strawberry extract will give it a nice strawberry flavor as well. You do want a decent amount of this in here to really moisten the whole cake. You don't want it so much that it falls apart, but you do want a decent amount. That's pretty good. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to make a chocolate mousse, or white chocolate mousse, excuse me. We're going to make a white chocolate mousse. I have my white chocolate ganache that I made earlier, and I have some heavy cream. I'm going to mix the two together, and I'm going to put this up to whip. So we're going to use a whisk on this, and we're just going to put it up to whip. So while this is whipping, I just want to show you what I did. I brought a 1 pound container of strawberries, and over here, you'll see that I took 8 strawberries and I cut them in half. And what I did, these weren't washed, they were brushed with a slightly damp paper towel. You don't want to get strawberries wet or they'll die. I took the biggest and nicest ones. They're going to be for the top of the cake. So I took 8 strawberries, I cut them in half, and that will be to decorate the top. Over here, I took all the rest. They were also brushed very well, and I just cut them in half. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take the nicest, most even ones, and I'm going to line the outside of the pan. So I'm going to take this part and put it right against the outside. Here, I'll start over here so you can see. You want to try to take the ones that are even in size. Like this one's actually a little bit too tall, so we'll not use that for now. We can always trim the bottom if we need that. And while I'm working on this, I'm going to put my mousse back up to whip. But I just wanted to show you what I'm doing. So I'm out of the ones that are same size, but I do have some oversized ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim the bottom a little bit so it fits nicely. So that is always an option, and that way it'll fit. There was 1 or 2 other bigger ones. There you go. While this is mixing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of these and I'm just going to put these standing up throughout my cake. So if you look at this, it's what they call stiff peak, meaning it's very, very bumpy, if you will, or hilly. I'm just going to give it a quick mix. We're just going to mix it just for another couple seconds. You can't over whip this because when you over whip heavy cream, it turns the butter. And that's good. You can take this off. What we're going to do, very, very hard, I'm actually going to slam it into this so it really kind of goes down. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on this so it's pretty even. And I want it to be pretty tight in there. I'll do that to get all the air out. And also, when I take off this ring, it has to be set enough that the strawberries all stay in place. So it's not perfectly even at this point. It's not a big deal. So we're up to our next part. We're going to take our simple syrup and brush this layer as well. This one will definitely get a little bit less than the other one. Reason being is because in a minute I'm going to have to flip this over, and if you make this too soggy, it will break when you flip it, which I've had happen to me. It's not fun. You can still make the cake work, but it's just easier if it doesn't break. That's probably pretty good. Now with this one, you have to kind of wish me luck because alrighty, not too bad. Just center it, good. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take some frosting. Actually, it doesn't look very even, so I'm just gonna push on a little bit to try to make it even. it's nice and even. Take a little bit of frosting. Not really frosting, it's our white chocolate mousse. That's probably decent. We're going to get this nice and smooth in a minute or two. Alrighty. So now it still looks a little rough. Hold that thought. So as I said, our cake definitely looks a little bit rough. I'm going to show you how to fix that. I cleaned off my spatula thoroughly, dried it off thoroughly. You notice there's a flame on. I'm going to heat this up just for a couple seconds on each side. Maybe 5 seconds on each side. You don't want it piping hot, but you definitely want it warm. Now watch what happens when I go over my cake. This time I'm actually going to go around with it. Have some paper towel so you can wipe it off, get it clean. And see over here how it's kind of up and over? We'll just smooth that out. Make sure you wipe it each time. Alrighty, so next thing we have to do is mark our cake into 16ths. To do this, we're going to take a knife and do your best to very, very lightly, just make very, very light marks. Then we're going to go across again. Good. Next thing we're going to do is we have a piping bag with a star tip. Get rid of our knife. We'll take some of our white chocolate mousse. And then one right in the middle. Oops, I hate when that happens. Hold that thought. Right, so that's on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a small knife and we're going to heat this up same way we did with the spatula. And what I'm doing right now is I'm loosening it so that when I take this off, it will pop right off, hopefully. Going to heat it up a little bit more. You don't want to make it too hot, but you definitely want to make it hot enough that it goes in easy. All right, now I'm hoping that this will come off easy. Probably not with my luck, but it might. Oh, there it goes. Now very often you'll see like a little spot over here. I'm just gonna take a drop of whipped cream and fix that one little spot. Once again, we're gonna heat up our spatula. Anyway, heat up your spatula. Just go around one last time. Fix up any spots that need fixing. And voila, our cake is finished. So we have a professionally looking cake. I'm gonna stick this in the refrigerator. It does have to be refrigerated, absolutely has to stay in the refrigerator until you're serving it. But once you're serving it, you have your lines to cut it. Take a very hot knife. You can either dip in hot water or on the stove when you cut it, and you'll have a beautiful cake. In a little while when I cut it open, I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.